ever felt like your drinking might be more dangerous than you think? Well, today I'm uncovering 7 early warning signs that alcohol could be killing you. These aren't your typical warnings. They're subtle, often ignored signals that your body is crying out for help. If you've ever wondered about the real impact of your drinking habits, then stick around because this video might just be the wake-up call that you need. So a very quick introduction. My name is Leon Sylvester. I'm the founder of SoberClear.com, and we're a coaching company that uses a totally new method to help business owners and professionals get control of their drinking quickly. If you want information on the full program, just go to SoberClear.com. But if you want to access a free video training that shows you how this new method works, then click the link in the description. It's a video I don't publish anywhere else online, so the only way you can access this free video training is clicking the link in the description, putting in your name and email address, and then a new video will start playing. That video will show you how to control your drinking quickly without AA, willpower, cravings, or anything like that. It's totally different, it's totally new. So if you want that training, click the link in the description, and now let's get into it. So at number 1, we have a preoccupation with alcohol. This is one of the most unmistakable signs that your drinking is starting to get out of control, that you were transitioning from the so-called social drinker to an actual addict. See, in the early days, you basically go about your daily life without thinking about drinking. You might have been drinking several times a week, but for the rest of your time, the alcohol didn't really go into your thoughts. But as the addiction starts to take hold, preoccupation with alcohol becomes a central theme in a heavy drinker's life. The booze basically lives rent-free in your head. So, for example, when you're having a bad day of work, all you can think about is getting that bottle when you get home. Or maybe if you run out of booze one evening and you can't think of anything other than going out and buying more alcohol. Alcohol also becomes a factor when it comes to planning any sort of activity. A night out, a social visit, a trip. You simply struggle to make any sort of plans without factoring in the availability of alcohol. The other sign of increasing preoccupation is how easily you're triggered by alcohol-related stimuli. So things that used to elicit no emotional reaction in you whatsoever now evoke a strong automatic response. Passing outside of a bar, maybe having a cigarette after a meal, viewing a drink scene in a movie. You get the point. What's astonishing is how severe this preoccupation with alcohol can become before some people even take notice. If you're not sure how far along you are, here's a simple experiment that you can do. Pick a day, and starting from the moment that you wake up, be mindful of the occasions when you think about alcohol. And you could write them down if you want each time you notice. Now, you might be astonished at A, just how frequently you were thinking about drinking, and B, how impervious to this that you've been up until this point. Have you noticed this? Let me know in the comment section. I will check every single comment on this video, but let me know if you've noticed more preoccupation with alcohol. Number 2 is increasing amounts of alcohol tolerance. So another dangerous sign is that your alcohol consumption is increasing and you're drinking more and more because your previous consumption levels simply cannot give you the same buzz as before. Many heavy drinkers pride themselves on this and will frequently challenge lighter drinkers to competitions, make fun of them, and so on. But instead of something to be proud about, this tolerance is one of the biggest red flags that alcohol is killing you. It's actually so important that many scientific works on alcoholism list tolerance as a core feature. Statistically, if you're tolerant to booze, you're far more likely to progress to full-blown alcoholism, and so much faster. At a physiological level, tolerance to alcohol results from 2 separate processes. Firstly, your brain adapts to the pleasant effects of alcohol. Because you keep on artificially triggering the same pleasure centers in the brain, those eventually become numb to the ethanol. The second process that leads to tolerance is metabolic. After years of training, your body learns to break down and expel the alcohol much faster. The enzymes used to break down alcohol become much more active and efficient. The fact that it's now metabolized quicker means that the same number of drinks as before cannot achieve the same blood concentration of alcohol. So you have A, a brain that is more immune to the pleasant effects of alcohol, and B, a metabolic syndrome that makes it very difficult to achieve the same alcohol blood levels. And the only solution to these problems is, you guessed it, to drink more. The problem is that even though it gets harder to get a buzz from booze, its deadly effects on your body are still there. You never get a free pass from alcohol toxicity. Though you're now metabolizing alcohol faster, it is still all being converted to acetaldehyde. See, this highly toxic metabolite is around 30 times more harmful than ethanol itself. Acetaldehyde is responsible for the bulk of the damage to your body. And no matter how tolerant you've become, almost all of the ethanol is still being converted to acetaldehyde in your liver. There's just no escaping this. And even though your brain's pleasure centers are not as sensitive as they used to be, all the alcohol that reaches your brain is still highly neurotoxic. It's steadily killing off brain cells and eventually shrinking your brain in size. If you keep on drinking, by the time of your death, your shrunken brain may well weigh a full ounce less. Number 3, let's look at weight gain. Now, booze is very high in calories, starting from, say, 100 calories in a neat serving of a spirit, all the way up to 200 or more calories in a pint of lager. But it's not just the calories in the drink itself. For reasons that aren't clear, alcohol stimulates your appetite, and it generally does this for high-fat, salty, greasy foods. Things like pizza and potato chips and hamburgers and so on. And I'm sure none of this comes as a surprise to anybody. I mean, when was the last time you had a few drinks and then found yourself craving a piece of broccoli or a green salad? What you might be surprised to learn is that our brains don't adjust our appetite for food given the calories from the booze. As scientists like to say, they don't compensate for them. Now, let me give you an example so you can understand this. Let's say your dinner is 700 calories and your beer is 200 calories. If you drink the beer right before dinner, your appetite will not register a corresponding decrease. In other words, you won't be leaving 200 calories worth of food on your plate. You simply drink the beer and hoover the dinner off your plate all the same. Now, not only will the calories from the beer not diminish your appetite, on the contrary, the beer will actually stimulate your appetite and you'll wipe your plate clean even faster. Combine all these factors, the high calorie count that is not compensated and an appetite that is stimulated for the worst kind of food. Well, the outcome is almost inevitable. For example, one study invited over 1,000 male drinkers to write down what they ate on a day that they drank versus a day where they abstained. And the results were pretty shocking. On the drinking day, the men consumed an average of 168 more calories through food. And please understand this. This refers only to calories from food, not counting the booze. The booze contributed an extra 264 calories, bringing the total extra calories to a whopping 432 on the drinking day. These additional calories tended to come from things like white potatoes, meat, and discretionary fats. On the contrary, on their drinking days, the men lowered their consumption of vegetables and milk. Unsurprisingly, you can expect to lose 1.5 to 2 kilos during your first 30 days of not drinking. And provided you stay sober, the weight will keep falling off you until you eventually approach your normal healthy levels. The 4th sign are blackouts. So we saw how, with mathematical certainty, tolerance leads to increased consumption. And this is where the scary thing, blackouts, come into play. Now, people often confuse blackouts with passing out, but the two are very different. When you pass out, you lose consciousness completely. You're basically non-responsive, just like when sleeping. Blackouts, on the other hand, are when you retain your consciousness, but subsequently lose memory of events that took place during a drinking episode. So you wake up the following morning after, and your friends describe events for which you have absolutely no recollection. You may have been carrying out conversations at a party, arguing, driving, whatever. You were conscious at the time and fully responsive to your environment. You just don't remember any of it afterwards. Sometimes when somebody clues you in about what happened during the blackout, parts of your memory of the event can come back. And researchers call these fragmentary blackouts. En bloc blackouts, on the other hand, happen when it's impossible to recall any of the events even when reminded. Can social drinkers also experience blackouts? Well, yes, they can. In surveys, up to 40% of college undergrads reported experience at least one blackout in the last year. What separates these people from future addicts is the frequency of blackouts. This is so crucial that it was actually at the center of one of the very first studies on the typical progression of alcoholism. This was done in the 1950s by a researcher called Elvin Morton Jelinek. After interviewing many people suffering with alcohol use disorder, Jelinek concluded that frequent blackouts will often mark the beginning of the progression from social to problem drinking. He noted that not only are blackouts more frequent in those who have transitioned to problem drinking, they can also often come about even after mild intoxication, sometimes as little as 4 drinks. Though they are a massive red flag at the start, today we know that these blackouts will, in the grand scheme of things, be kind of insignificant compared to the overall damage that alcohol will inflict on one's memory. Eventually, all aspects of memory will suffer. This includes recalling events of the past and the ability to remember to do something in the future. When all is said and done, memory will probably be the one cognitive domain to take the biggest beating of all. At number 5, we have an irregular heart rate. Now, contrary to popular media's propaganda,
light to moderate drinking can actually be good for your heart health.
Alcohol is not good for your heart. It's bad for it. Very bad. This includes even the most organic and wholesome of all red wines. Even if you ferment it on your own property and know exactly what went into it, it is all bad for your heart. So you see, regardless of how much you consume it and from what source, the plain fact is ethanol is cardiotoxic. It damages your heart and cardiovascular system in general. And one of the earliest signs that your boozing is getting out of control is an irregular heartbeat. The scientific name for this is atrial fibrillation, but you'll often hear it referred to as holiday heart. It got this name from an astute doctor who noticed it in many of his patients who returned from holidays that involved heavy drinking. And that is literally all it can take, a couple of weeks of heavy drinking. And don't think that this is something rare either, even though it sounds so scary. Up to 60% of all emergency department visits for atrial fibrillation are alcohol related. It can appear either while you are still intoxicated or up to 1 to 2 days later. Some other people don't even have to binge drink. With them, steady low level consumption over a sustained period of time can be enough. While I'm talking low level, I literally mean as little as 1 to 2 drinks a day. And with each extra daily drink, you increase your risk of atrial fibrillation by 8%. Now, regardless of how it comes about, one thing is certain. Your heart is giving you a massive, very easy to spot red flag. If you stop drinking early on, the atrial fibrillation will most likely resolve. Keep on drinking, however, and it will most likely progress to a more persistent form called, well, persistent atrial fibrillation. This can be far more difficult to resolve and also deadly. When you progress to this persistent form, you are putting yourself at an increased risk for blood clots, stroke, and heart failure. Now, you might want to check your pulse, because if the atrial fibrillation is there, you'll probably feel it straight away in the form of missed beats, double beats, or beats that are irregularly spaced. At number 6, we have increased blood pressure, also known as hypertension. See, another sign of growing toxicity to your heart, hypertension, is a hallmark of problem drinking. An objective, clear-cut indicator that your drinking is starting to compromise your health. Scientists now know that hypertension increases linearly with consumption, from just over a drink a day for women and 2 drinks for men. According to the World Health Organization, 16% of all hypertensive diseases are alcohol related. The link between alcohol and hypertension can be separated into 2 components. First, there's the direct damage drinking causes to your heart and cardiovascular system on account of its toxicity. Then there's all the other problems that alcohol will create or exacerbate, and which in turn will contribute to hypertension. These include unhealthy calories, weight gain, insulin resistance, elevated cortisol, and sleep problems. Now, hypertension in and of itself generally has no symptoms. You'll need to get it measured to spot the problem, and I would strongly encourage you to do this, especially if you're still drinking. The problem is high blood pressure increases your risk of severe disease and premature death in all sorts of ways. Things like stroke, aneurysms, kidney problems, vision impairment, and so on. On the flip side, after an initial increase during the first few days, your blood pressure will fall rapidly after you stop drinking. Only a month after your last drink, it will have returned to its baseline levels. Guys, at number 7, we have lies and deceptive behavior. See, one of the core features of drinking that's getting out of hand is self-deception. Being in denial about how much the drinking has gotten out of hand, rationalizing it to avoid facing the unpleasant reality. But self-deception is always a bit subjective. I mean, hey, if I tell myself that I can stop whenever I want, who knows, maybe I can. Now, a far more objective sign that things are getting out of hand is when you start deceiving and lying to the most important people in your life. Here, things are more clear-cut. If you're starting to hide empty bottles or pour your liquor into your coffee, then this is pretty black and white. You can't really explain this any other way. When you start lying to your loved ones about where you've been and what you've been doing, again, this is pretty unambiguous. Deception is actually one of the core features of families with those suffering from alcohol use disorder. As one researcher already from the 1960s put it, the home of the drinker is a place where, quote, people have lost their ability to be honest, where the families deny, minimize, discount, and rationalize. Note this description extends to the entire family, not just the drinker's family members. Sadly, and this is one of the great tragedies of drinking, very soon, all the family members will be forced to lie in order to survive. The spouse of the drinker will typically transition from an initial denial of the problem to being actively deceptive herself, typically in order to shield the children from the chaos. But the children are not dumb, and very soon they will be forced to start lying to their peers in order to cover up what's happening in the house. Pretty sad stuff. And guys, if you click the video on the screen now, you can learn 3 secrets to help you get in control of your drinking.